Om Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bhurivodbhudam Yatha Nidraya Yasakshit Kurude Prabodhasamai Swatmanameva Vyam Tasmai Sri Gurumurtaye Namaidam Sri Dakshinamurtaye. Seeing the universe contained within himself, like a city seen in a mirror, but appearing as if produced outside through Maya or illusion, as in sleep, as being really in the self within all of us. He who realizes at the time of spiritual illumination and liberation his own immutable self within, to him the incarnation of supreme knowledge, to see Dakshinamurti, is this salutation. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Today's topic is liberation according to Vedanta. I can begin with a very interesting imagery from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, when he describes the nature of liberation and spiritual illumination. He takes an example from our everyday life. Suppose you imagine a huge locomotive moving fast on a railway track. It is very huge, very long, and very fast. And then you also imagine a small worm or insect crawling on the same track, coming from the opposite direction. Now, if you look at the physical dimension of the worm and the locomotive, you can see that the locomotive is millions of times stronger, more powerful, and faster than the worm. The worm is nothing in terms of physical strength, speed, or sheer power, the moving power. And the locomotive can crush billions of such worms in a matter of seconds. But there is one difference. The locomotive is moving on borrowed intelligence. It has no choice. If it wants to stop, if it wants to change its direction, the driver should apply the brake. If the driver remains inactive, the locomotive has no choice but keep moving ahead. It cannot change its track. It cannot change its direction. It has to keep moving because it has no intelligence of itself. No intelligence for itself. The crawling worm, on the other hand, though so insignificant in comparison, has got one advantage. It can make its own decision. It has its own choice. If it wants, it can move away from the track and save its life. But the locomotive cannot do that. Now, that's the difference between human beings and the rest of the creation. The human beings can make a choice. The human beings can, if they want, move ahead in the evolutionary process. Not evolution in its physical sense, because evolution in its physical sense has come to an end. We cannot grow another head or another leg. We cannot have it. It's over. But Evolution at a higher level still has plenty of scope to move forward. Evolution at a level of wisdom, the proper utilization of our time, energy, and ideas. In these areas, the human beings do have a choice. They can decide for themselves. If they want, they can live as slaves of their own senses. Or if they want, they can try to control their senses of perception and senses of action. They can control, they can direct them towards a creative spiritual channel. That is the uniqueness, the unique position of human beings. It all depends upon what we think of ourselves, what is our own idea of our true nature. From the physical point of view, if you look upon yourself as a physical body, then perhaps we are not very different, not much above the animal kingdom. The animals do need food. Human beings need food. When it starts raining, the animals move to some shelter. So do human beings. Maybe the human needs are more refined. Human desires are more refined, more focused. But then, if you look upon human beings as physical beings, there is not much difference. But there is a difference, we can understand that. Even from a non-spiritual point of view, if you look at the explosive developments in science, technology, and also the results of human adventure, the discovery of sea routes, the exploitation, in a positive sense, I'm using the term, of natural resources, harnessing the natural phenomena to increase physical comforts. All these are the unique powers of human beings. But in course of time, we understand that though science and technology, exploitation of natural resources, give us comforts, give us power, give us knowledge, but it cannot give us wisdom, because wisdom is the higher faculty that teaches us how to make proper use of the fruits of science and technology and how not to make improper use of the same natural gifts. Now, going back to the earlier example, that instinct that you find a crawling worm is a tiny, grossest expression of thirst for freedom and liberation. Because the worm wants to save its physical entity, physical existence. It has a choice. So it wants to save itself from destruction. And this is at the grossest form an expression of our inner desire for going beyond the tyranny of the senses. And it is this which we call the hunger for liberation. These ideas have been dealt with in innumerable religious and spiritual traditions, depending upon the cultural, socio-anthropological features of those cultures and civilizations. But you always find in all cultures this expression, this hunger and thirst for going beyond the present, going beyond the sensory level. Sometimes we are forced to make this inquiry. There are two types of spiritual endeavor that if you read world religions, you find two types of spiritual quests. In many cases, we are compelled, we are forced by circumstances to turn our attention, our inquiry towards a higher level, different channel. When we become depressed, disillusioned, in spite of enjoying all physical comforts, or when we are not able to get anything that we are looking for. In both cases, circumstances catch us by the throat and force us to move in another direction. Circumstances force us to make an inquiry in another direction, higher direction. In many cases, this investigation sometimes takes human beings in the opposite direction. Alcoholism actually is an attempt to run away, flee from the disturbing realities of everyday life. Alcoholism as a pathological disease. Gambling is another one. So also meditation. Those who try to meditate, those who try to read great spiritual books, the lives and teachings of saints, those who try to get familiar with higher spiritual ideas are moving in the right direction. Others are moving in the wrong direction. But the investigation, the quest is always there. To move beyond, to run. In one case, it is a blind flight from the world of realities, which makes us knock at the wrong doors. And alcoholism, depression, melancholy, and suicide, these are the results. On the other hand, if we make proper use of our inherited wisdom, then we can make the right choice. That's why it is said, spirituality forced by circumstances may be good, but it's certainly not the ideal one. Because very often, people who turn to spiritual life, just forced by circumstances, after some time when they find a journey is not making enough progress, well, I've meditated for so long, I prayed for so long, I tried to lead a good life for so long, still I'm not getting anything. The reason is they turn to spiritual life as part of the attempt to flee from the world of realities, the world of problems. And when they find those problems no longer exist, they have a tendency to go back to the same world which they were trying to run away from. So, spiritual life as an attempt to run away from the world of realities is certainly better than making no attempt, but it is not the ideal one. The ideal one is to make an early choice. In an ancient Sanskrit book, there is an interesting story. It comes in one of the classes books. So they say, Kaumara acharet prajnaha. The intelligent, the wise man should make a choice as early as possible. We should not wait till the circumstances force us to turn to spiritual life. It will be unwise. So we should make an early choice. So in this case, Vedanta prescribes 3 methods. Vedanta says there are 3 unique gifts that are gifts from God, which are the special, the unique features of human life. One is birth or life as a human being. The second one is a real, genuine desire for spiritual life. The third one is an opportunity to come in contact with spiritual ideas, either through direct contact with spiritual persons, or by reading books, or by somehow becoming familiar with spiritual ideas. Manishuttum, mumukshuttum, mahapurusha samseka. The original exponent of Vedanta as a compact system of spiritual philosophy was Shankaracharya. He writes in one of his books, these are the 3 unique gifts which God has given to human beings. If they want, they can, first of all, they are born as human beings. Animals have no choice. Animals have to decide depending upon their instinct. But human beings can stand away from this flow of instincts and ask the question, who am I? What is the meaning of my life? Where am I coming from? And in which direction should I go? Sometimes these questions come very late. But anyhow, it's better to be able to ask this question to ourselves. What is the ultimate destiny of human life? is human life that begins with birth and ends with a piece of stone in the cemetery. The dead body is pushed through that huge shell or tube, and it turns into ashes, and put everything together in a cemetery, and a piece of stone is installed. And once a year people go and put flowers. That's the end of human journey. That is tragic. Vedanta says that is only at the physical level. And physical level is the most insignificant, the grossest dimension of human life. The physical life is the grossest and the most insignificant, the perishable aspect of human life. There is an imperishable, eternal reality. I can take you to a very interesting episode that is from one of the earliest devotional classics of Vedantic tradition. There was a king once upon a time. He was a very intelligent, noble king, well respected and honored and loved by his subjects. But once he was traveling in a forest. In those days, it was the duty of kings and emperors to see that the sages and saints doing penance and meditation in forests are not disturbed. They should not be disturbed. So they used to frequently kill wild animals like lions, tigers, and so on. In ancient times, when there were a huge population of these carnivorous animals in the forests. So this king was moving about in the forest. Then he heard a noise from a distance, and he thought it is a wild animal, maybe a mad elephant, wild elephant, which normally these wild elephants used to go about destroying the huts and hermitages. So it was his duty as a king to kill these wild elephants. So he shot an arrow, thinking that a wild elephant is drinking water, is a mad elephant. And it so happened that actually it was a small boy, the son of a hermit who was meditating in a hut. He had come to the lake to collect water. And his father, the hermit, was blind. And he was sitting in a forest hermitage. The son had walked for some distance, had come to the lake, and was trying to carry water for his blind father. It so happened that boy died on the spot. And then the king came in search of the wild elephant, thinking that it was a wild elephant, of course. Then he found a small boy, an innocent-looking boy with a water pot in his hand, fallen dead. He was very much upset. And he understood, he made some inquiries. He understood that he had committed a terrible sin. And of course, the boy, just before dying, he explained, he was about to die. When the king arrived, the boy said, "Look here, you have committed a terrible sin. My old blind father is waiting for water. He's thirsty. And you have committed a terrible sin." And the king was upset. The boy died immediately. And the king took the water, the water pot, to the hermitage and gave the water to that boy. And of course, to the hermit, he drank the water. Now, that hermit blessed the king for this discretion, this wisdom. But at the same time, he said, "Though you are a great king, you are a noble man, still you have committed a sin. You have to face the consequences." And the king later on gave up everything and went to a forest and led the rest of his life as a he became a hermit. So immediately he realized that all his comforts, everything were enjoyments at the sensory level. He wanted to go beyond the sensory level. And he led the life of a saint. The same king was reborn the next life as a prince, as an emperor of the same kingdom. And something happened to him also, which gradually led to his liberation. That's the story which I'm coming to. In his next life, he was born as a king, and an identical story with some difference happened to him. He was hungry and thirsty, moving in a forest, hunting animals, reached a hermitage. There he found an ancient sage, a hermit, meditating. This king expected this saint to get up from his seat and offer him water, to treat him well. He was a noble man, good man, but somehow for some time his mind was deluded, and he did something which was a heinous sin. He took the body of a dead serpent, a snake, and put it on the neck of this saint who was meditating in the hermitage. And he went his way. The same, an identical story, that hermit's son came and found that his father was sitting immersed in meditation with a dead serpent on his neck. And the little boy cursed, without knowing who did that, the person who was responsible for insulting his father. And the king came to know that it was a great sage, and he became repentant. This is the beginning of the next chapter in this story. When this king, the emperor, came to know that he had committed a heinous sin by putting the dead snake in the neck of a great hermit. And not only that, as a consequence, his father, the hermit's father, put a curse on this man. Whoever must have insulted my father by putting a dead snake on my father's neck, this man will die within 7 days. He will be bitten by a snake and he will die within 7 days. That was the curse with the little son of the hermit put on the fate of this king. And people came to him, reported to him, look here, you committed a terrible sin by insulting a great hermit who was sitting immersed in meditation in a forest, by putting a dead snake on his neck. And his son, who is also a great hermit, ascetic, have put a curse on you without knowing who did this. And anybody, whoever may be the person who has committed this terrible sin, shall die within 7 days, bitten by a poisonous snake. You know the reaction of this king. That is the subject we are going to deal with, liberation. The king made a choice. What he did, I have got a very short life, 7 into 24 hours. So, what should I do? Now, what will we normally do? Suppose we come to know we don't have many days or many months to live. What happens? Normal human beings will become extremely anguished, sad, shocked. Or some people may withdraw all the money from the bank, go to some luxurious picnic spots and lead a luxurious life. Some people may die out of shock. Many things could happen. This king wanted to take this as an opportunity. So a curse was turned into a blessing. What he did, he decided, well, I deserve this fate because I did something wrong, I committed a sin. As a result of this, I must give up my kingdom, my comforts. So he declared his son as the next heir apparent. The son became the king, the crown prince, and he left his kingdom, his palace, everything. And he came to the banks of Ganga, it's a holy river. And he decided, I shall sit here and for 7 days I shall meditate on God, on spiritual truth. So practically he became a great monk at that very moment. The moment he decided to renounce everything, he became a monk. And many sages and saints came to know of this episode. They all came to the banks of the Ganga. And among them there was a great sage. His name was Shuka. He was well known for his wisdom and spiritual attainments. When this great sage had appeared on the bank of Ganga to congratulate and bless this king for the intelligent decision that he made, when he found that only 7 days to live, what he did? Yes, for 7 days I should think of the beyond. I should not live as a slave of my senses. I had enjoyed, I had a kingdom, comforts, everything. Now, is there something beyond the sensory level? Is there something beyond physical body? Am I just a physical body? Am I just a mental, psychological, or intellectual being? Or do I have a spiritual dimension? He wanted to know. He started his spiritual penance. He started his meditation. And when the great saint appeared before him, he asked one question. The question is this: Atha prichami samsiddhim yoginam paramam gurum purushasyeha yatkaryam mriyamanasya sarvatha. The question is this. Sanskrit is a verse. The translation is, I am going to ask you one question. What's the question? What should a dying man do? Remember, this question is not confined to the fate of a dying man. It is a question which every intelligent living human being should ask himself. That's the problem. I said earlier, we become spiritual seekers forced by circumstances, or we become spiritual seekers by choice, using our wisdom. The superior person, superior spiritual seeker, thinks and makes a choice at the beginning itself. And of course, others also are equally good. You find many great saints and sages. Saint Francis of Assisi, after whom this city is named. He himself became a saint, partly by circumstances. So, there's nothing wrong in becoming a spiritual seeker forced by circumstances. But it's better to make a choice of our own. So the question was put to him, what should a dying man do? In answer to this question, the saint replied, the ultimate goal of human existence is to leave this world with a smile on your face, without any botheration. You have led a meaningful, intelligent life in this world. Now, you may ask the question, what does liberation to do with this? In fact, liberation is possible only if we look upon our life as a journey leading to a higher spiritual goal. It is not something that should be forced upon us. It should be something that we choose when we are young, healthy, and intelligent. So, in answer to this, the saint answered. He said, Edavan jnana yogabhyam swadharma parinisthaya janma labha parapumsam ante naharayana smriti. Any of you who are interested, if you look at the translation of a great classical work like Bhagavata Purana, written around 7th century AD, its first book, second chapter, begins with this discussion, with this answer. The whole book, which is a very huge book, it's a huge work, classic, written in the 7th century, is an answer to the question put by a king who had only 7 into 24 hours to live. The question was, what should a dying man do? How he should meditate? How he should lead the rest of his life? So the answer is this. You should be able to leave this world with the remembrance of God in your heart. If you leave this world thinking that this world is the only thing you have to live, and beyond this there is terrible burning hell, then you won't have a smile on your face when you leave this body. On the other hand, if you look upon this physical body as a very insignificant aspect of our total personality, if our understanding of our own life is beyond the physical dimension, and if we also realize that this physical dimension is a passing phase, it is only a semicolon or a comma, not a full stop, then we will be able to leave this world with a smile on the face. So, Ante Narayana Smriti literally means one should be able to think of God in our hearts while leaving this world. It is a very devotional way of putting it from a philosophical angle. What does it mean? We must be able to look upon life as an opportunity that is given to us to face, to prepare for death. And death is not a terrifying thing. It is a creative crisis. It is not something that should terrify us. It is part of life itself. According to Vedanta, liberation comes when we realize that we are something beyond the physical dimension. So long as we are convinced that we are these physical bodies, we are born, we live, we die, and we are reborn. There is nothing wrong in it. But so long as we are looking upon ourselves as the physical bodies, then we must direct our senses and mind to spiritual channels, enriching and reinforcing our mind with spiritual culture, spiritual tendencies, spiritual ideas, so that at the end we will have the feeling we have led a meaningful life. We may not have reached liberation, but we have led a meaningful life. This idea is the first preparatory stage for liberation. Once we enrich our mind, reinforce our mind with spiritual ideas, then slowly we will be convinced that we are actually the all-pervading, immanent truth that is the ultimate transcendental reality. Now, there is an interesting episode in another Upanishads that also describes the different dimensions of our identity. As I said earlier, are we the physical bodies, or are we psychological entities or intellectual entities? Of course, it's obvious that we are ultimately beyond something physical. And we also know that we are something beyond the intellectual or the psychological. So what actually are we? So there is a dialogue between a prince and a sage in another great Vedantic book. It's called Upanishad. A great saint and a king. It's a dialogue. The king asked the question, very simple question. At the beginning, it may look a bit too simple. He asked the question, how do we live in this world? What light helps us to move about? What is the light that helps us to live in this world, to move about, to do our duties, and so on? The simple answer is sunlight. Then the king continues the question, what happens after the sun is set in the west? At night, he says moonlight. The third question, suppose there is neither sunlight nor moonlight, what happens? You may start a fire. And then suppose there is no fire, no sunlight, no moonlight, suppose you are sitting in a dark room. You can't see anything, no sunlight, no moonlight, you cannot start lit a candle. But how do we come to know of what is going on around us? What is the source of information and knowledge? How do we come to know of the external world? We are not sleeping, we are fully awake, but we cannot see anything. Then the answer is sound, speech. Because sound and speech becomes the instrument through which we come to know of the existence of different entities around us. The last question takes us straight to liberation and Vedanta. Last question is, there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no candle, and there is no sound. Suppose you are deaf, then what is the source of knowledge? Well, we may be deaf, but we have seen things during daylight when we are outside the room. So, we may be sitting somewhere, we may be thinking about what we saw, what we experienced during daylight. How do we experience those things? So, the answer is, even when there is no daylight, no moonlight, no sound coming, no candlelight, still there is a light within. And this light is the light of Atman, light of self, light of consciousness, is Atma Jyoti. Take away this Atma Jyoti, then sun, moon, space, none of these things will be able to be of any help to us. So once we realize this Atman, and this is our real entity, now it becomes very obvious. Because when there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no sound, and no fire, nothing, still we will continue living. And we become aware of things. There is a light within us, the light of all lights. Light should not be interpreted as physical light. Light should be interpreted as something that reveals things. What is the function of light? The function of light is to reveal things. So, suppose sunlight is there if a dead man cannot see anything, because Atman or self, soul has withdrawn itself from that body. So, if the self or Atman is present in that body, then sunlight or moonlight, other forms of entities will be of help to us. In other words, all other lights borrow their light from Atman. Light again should be understood. Light means revealer. Light is something in whose presence things get revealed. Light has two functions. It reveals itself, it also reveals other entities. All other entities can only reveal themselves when there is light. They cannot reveal other things. But light can reveal itself. And light also is a revealer of other entities. So, the Upanishad says, our true nature is the eternal light within. Once we are convinced of this, then we can, with this conviction in mind, we can continue our duties, perform our duties and responsibilities with intelligence, wisdom. We may have to make use of the senses, but we will be able to look upon our own senses as our servants, as tools in our hands. We will not be enslaved by the senses. That's the main difference between a person who has set his eyes on liberation, on trans-empirical dimension of his personality, and other human beings who look upon themselves as physical entities. Those who think of themselves as physical entities live in the world of senses. For them, there is nothing beyond the world of senses. In other words, they are directed by the senses. They are controlled by the senses. They give complete freedom to the senses. If we give freedom to our senses, it leads to spiritual slavery. If we give freedom to our senses, senses become terrible tyrants. On the other hand, if we can control the senses with the help of higher wisdom, then we get freedom from the senses. And freedom from the senses leads to liberation. It leads to spiritual freedom. So liberation is nothing but spiritual freedom. So, as I said, the main problem in human life is circumstances forcing us to a spiritual life or making our own choice. The main obstacle in modern times is we always try to interpret everything in our life in the light of pragmatism. To what extent our duties, our resources are of some benefit us. Whatever we do, we establish a link with what we do with its immediate associated results. What practical benefit, what beneficial results are going to can be enjoyed by my action. So every action is inevitably linked to its practical, tangible, beneficial result. So long as we are in the world of this result orientation, we can never think of spiritual liberation. Ultra-pragmatism makes us either machines or monsters. Because machine is essentially a practical tool. Ultra-idealism sometimes leads to utopianism. Theoretical, dogmatic ideas. But ultra-pragmatism is still worse. So Vedanta tells us that the first step to get freedom, to get liberation from the senses is to cut this chain that links us, links whatever we do, links all our actions to its immediate beneficial result. Can we do something without thinking for a moment of its immediate result? Something noble, something high, something spiritual, unselfish. If we could do something noble, unselfish, without thinking for a moment of its immediate result, that's the first step in spiritual liberation. This is one way or other is emphasized in all world religions. When we read these ideas in the language of dogmatic, theological vocabulary, sometimes we think these are all theological dogmas, but every religious and spiritual tradition emphasizes one point, this unselfishness or motiveless action. In technical language, it's called unattachment. So the first step in spiritual liberation is to cut this chain that links, that binds whatever we do to its immediate result. And then we find that we become free, the beginning of freedom. And then we can find that we are something beyond the physical entities, because the attachment and the result orientation is directly linked to our own interpretation of our life in terms of physical entities. And once we cut this break, then we are free. When these ideas were preached and taught, a question very often may arise. This subject is discussed in the Bhagavad Gita. When the teacher of Gita discussed these different parts, you can practice this non-attachment, you can practice this high spiritual value, principle of unselfishness, either following the path of knowledge, the path of selfless action, or devotion. All these things were described. Then the disciple of Gita puts one question. Suppose you make an effort to practice spirituality. Either you do a lot of unselfish deeds for society, for family, for the country, for nation, so on. Or you pray and meditate. And you try to live a very unselfish spiritual life. But then we feel that, well, we are not on the right track. We don't make enough progress. This is a problem. This conflict is inevitable for any genuine spiritual seeker. In fact, this inner conflict is the one sign that guarantees that we are on the right track. Anybody who has no conflict either must be a great saint or he may not have even started his journey. So, the disciple, the student of Gita, asked this question. Airi Shraddhayopedo yoga chalidamanasaka aprapi yoga samsiddhim kam gadim Krishna gachati. This verse literally means this. Suppose a spiritual person, spiritual seeker, leads a very unselfish life. He meditates, he reads good books, he does his best to lead a very unselfish spiritual life. And he feels, he gets a feeling that he is not making enough progress. What should he do? Now, the teacher of Gita gives an interesting answer. He says, you need not worry. Even if you do not fully succeed, even if you die before you fully succeed, whatever little we do, that will become a spiritual capital. Because life is not one. Life is interpreted as a wheel, as a cyclic entity, not a straight line, linear progression. We are not just entities that are born, live for some time, and die. That's not the end of the story. So, whatever little we do, we meditate for half an hour, if we do some unselfish noble deed, if we think noble thoughts, whatever little we do, all these activities, practices, will produce a result. It may not be immediately visible. We may not be able to enjoy the result in our own life. That's why many people who lead very, very unselfish, we call spiritual life, sometimes they suffer a lot. So this is a big problem in every age there is a problem. The incompatibility between a compassionate God and a cruel world. If God is so compassionate and merciful, then why should there be problems in this world? He can solve all these problems. Either he has no power to solve these problems, or he is not all that good because he is not trying to solve all the problems. These are the two interpretations. Now Vedanta solved this mystery. Vedanta says God is not a person who solves our problems. If our machine is not running properly, we may call a mechanic or a plumber. Like that, we don't turn to God to fix our problems. God is not an ultimate mechanic or a fixer of problems. God is a spiritual principle that enables us to get the spiritual strength to solve our own problems. And once we get this strength, we feel these problems are no more problems. That's why often we pray and then we find the problem, our prayers are answered. Actually, God is giving us the spiritual strength so that we are able to solve our problems. So problems are no more problems, not because there are no problems, but because the spiritual power that we get through prayer and spiritual practices help us to become stronger than these problems. The problems are no more problems. That's how we solve the problems. Similarly, Lord Krishna says, whatever little we do, half an hour meditation, some unselfish deeds, unselfish thoughts, all these will create a spiritual capital. And when we die, when we are reborn, this spiritual capital will come to our rescue. We can draw our check on the strength of this capital, and we can continue our spiritual journey. So whatever little we do will be kept there, will not be lost. This is a great promise that comes in the 6th chapter of the Gita. Gita says that those who make a sincere effort to lead a spiritual life, even if they do not fully succeed, will get a chance in the next life to continue the journey from where they have stopped in this life. So no action, if it is unselfish and noble, will be lost. Every little spiritual practice produces its beneficial result. It may not be visible in this life, but it always will remain there, and it will help us to continue our spiritual journey in the next life. So liberation then becomes very much within our own cycle. So liberation means the liberation from the world of senses. So any attempt to practice any of these spiritual paths, either the path of unselfish action, meditation, or prayer, or devotion, all these will help us to get freedom from the world of senses, so that we will be able to direct our senses and mind to a spiritual channel. This is a real liberation in Vedanta. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Yam Shaiva Samupasade Shivaidi Brahmedi Vedantino Bauddha Buddhayadi Pramana Padava Kartyedi Nayyayikaha Arhan Nityada Jaina Shasanarada Karmedi Mimamsakaha Soyam no Vidadhadu Vanchita Phalam Trailokyanatho Hari. He who is worshipped as Shiva by the follower of Shiva, as Brahman by the Vedantins, as Buddha by the Buddhists, as Karta by Naiyayikas, and in different forms by the followers of different spiritual traditions, let that spiritual truth help and fulfill our spiritual desires. Om, peace, peace, peace.